Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Edward St. Pé. Monday night we had a great show. We talked to Peggy Brown from Hit the Road Entertainment, and she's a manager of some of the great blues artists around the central area of the state. And we talked about a fellow who was coming to town, Mike Stephenson, to do a number of stories for some of the European magazines like Blues and Rhythm. There are a number of magazines throughout Europe, in the UK, in France, other countries, that document some of the great blues artists, which that genre is very, very healthy in Europe, and probably has a bigger fan base there than right here at home in a lot of ways. Well, Mike Stephenson is here in Jackson doing articles for these various magazines this week. So we've got him here on the set. So we're going to talk to him about his perspective on why rhythm and blues, especially blues, Mississippi blues, is so big across the world, across Europe, and how that happened, and what he's been up to, and what he's up to here in Jackson right now. So we're going to talk to Mike Stephenson about his journey back to America to cover the blues. After this, stay with us. Well, we're talking to Mike Stephenson tonight, and Mike, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
All the way from Dover, England, right?
That's me, yep.
So, okay, now tell us, you are here in Jackson, and you are a writer for a number of the various blues publications throughout Europe, and so how many times have you been to Jackson?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not too sure. It's got to be, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, I guess. Jackson specifically.
And so when you come, you're meeting the blues artists, you're documenting their life. Do you take pictures as well as write?
Yeah, I take pictures as well. I wouldn't call myself a photographer, but I take pictures of the artists. What I do is primarily kind of like try to fix my visits around festival times. Yeah, around festival times. And then in between the festivals, that's when I meet up with people like Peggy Brown, Hit the Road Entertainment, who then connects me with some of the artists, specifically in the Jackson area. And that's then when we get to doing interviews with them on a very personal basis, quite often in the artist's home and all of this. The whole thing is just a fantastic experience for me, an out-of-towner.
So this is a huge genre all over the world, correct? Blues.
Well, it is, yes. And I can only speak for Europe, and there is a very, very big blues scene in Europe. Not only homegrown talent, but also for bringing in American artists to play a whole lot of clubs throughout Europe, and really some quite major festivals, jazz and blues festivals that have been established for many, many years in mainland Europe. Yeah.
So you look to be about the same generation as the guys from The Who and Led Zeppelin and all these guys. Okay, so we know the story about like the Rolling Stones becoming blues fans and then bringing the music back to America, and everything blew up. There was a great big success, the British invasion, but they were invading with our own indigenous music, American music, probably only indigenous music to America that we have, which is the blues, created here in the first place. So Tell us about that, your perspective. You grew up in Dover, which is south of London. Were you a part of the London scene during those years?
Oh yeah, I mean, back in those days, the main entertainment was music. You didn't have the internet or anything like that, so music was everywhere. Clubs were everywhere. Music was just bursting at the seams. You know, Rolling Stones playing London, major venues, but also there was a huge club network there as well within the UK at that particular time, and that's pretty much how I got my start really in music, was going to some local clubs that had world-class talent coming through. You know, an example being a club called Toffs in Folkestone, which is 6 miles away from me. And they had Canned Heat come through, you know. I mean, this is a club that would hold 250 people, and if the place caught fire, we'd all be dead, you know. I mean, it was just crazy back then. Cream in their early years come through there. Who else? 10 years after, John Mayall's Blues Breakers, who were hugely influential, but maybe haven't got the credit that they deserve for turning a whole lot of people, including myself, onto the blues. I mean, particularly John Mayall, I have to give him credit, he was just everywhere, night after night, club after club, he was playing. And of course, you know, through his band came so many fine musicians back in the day. Mick Taylor, who went on to the Rolling Stones, Peter Green, you know, who went on to Fleetwood Mac, Eric Clapton, and Cream, and whatever, you know. They're just some of the guys that came through his band. And they were playing the real deal blues. The Rolling Stones, I guess you'd call it R&B, but John Mayall was the real stone blues. And he went out of his way to actually give huge credit to the originators of the music.
Mayall did? John Mayall?
John Mayall,
yeah.
Absolutely. You know, on his albums, his early albums, he went out of his way to do covers of people like Albert King, J.B. Lenoir, Magic Sam, you know, all of this stuff. So for me, John Mayall was the influential guy.
He was the closest to the pure blues, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember him, you know, growing up. I mean, I remember him. He was always like on the fringe of great success in America, but not breaking through like, you know, Clapton and the other guys.
Yeah, he never made it big time, but a lot of folks who came through his bands clearly did. But he still had a huge fan base, but mainly at a club level, really.
It's so ironic, you know, that the Brits came back with the blues in the guise of British rock, you know, in basically just took America by storm, starting with the Beatles and the Stones, and then all the way through the years. Yeah. You know, I mean, Stevie Marriott and Humble Pie.
Yeah.
There's another one. I mean, that's a generation maybe later than the original guys, but they were playing blues, rock, you know.
Absolutely. Led Zeppelin, all this crew. You know, blues was just kind of, if it wasn't strict blues, blues was part of the makeup of music back then. The Kinks and stuff like this, you know, bands like Small Faces. A lot of it was R&B and blues orientated. So it kind of, you know, in your early influential years, like it was for me, it just kind of got in your blood, really. It was just there. It was on the radio, it was on TV, you know, and all of this.
So during that time, during that explosion, during the 60s, when all that was happening, had you discovered the fountainhead of that music, meaning Mississippi blues, or was it a later revelation?
Well, again, I have to turn to John Mayall as a source of reference because he was playing the real stone blues and went out of his way to give acknowledgement to the true blues artists. Yeah. You know, I was a bit inquisitive because I liked the music so much. I was a bit inquisitive, you know, and you think, well, who is this J.B. Lenoir guy? So then I used to go out to London. There used to be a record store out there called Dobell's. I mean, you know, blues collectors in England and Europe will all know Dobell's. They used to import stuff, albums back then. And if you were lucky, you might be able to pick up a Magic Sam CD or a J.B. Lenoir album, I should say, back then. You really had to search this stuff out. You know, you haven't got the internet back then. Yeah. So it was a voyage of discovery, really. if he wanted it to be, and it was for me. Just something about the music that I liked. And because you know, there was this blues stuff going on, and there was a market for it, then we started getting visiting American bluesmen coming over. The most famous series of festivals is American Folk Blues Festival throughout the 60s, which toured at major venues throughout all of Europe, and literally unbelievable cast of true blues musicians came over, from the old boys like Sunhouse, Mississippi John Hurt, Fred McDowell, Willie Dixon, Muddy Waters, yeah, the list went on, Magic Sam, Earl Hooker. So you could get, once a year you'd have the opportunity maybe to go to London to catch this show, if you could get tickets, because they sold out pretty quick. So again, it all just added to the fuel of this mysterious music that I specifically really got a hold of. And then, you know, you go out searching for more albums and stuff like this, and so it went on. It's just a fantastic voyage of discovery. The more I think about it, it really was really quite something, a real buzz. You know.
And so at some point you became professionally involved with the genre by becoming a writer that documented these artists.
No, never been professional at all. No. My profession is a psychiatric nurse back home, although I am now retired. But that job offered me very good income and a whole lot of security, enabled me to raise, you know, the family with my wife, and enabled me to save up some money and come to America in 1979 to Chicago. It was the first time we came into the US, specifically for the blues. So, you know, I've been pretty lucky, really. But never, I've never, although I write for magazines, none of it is of a professional or paid basis. It's just, it's a labour of love, as it is for the majority of people who write for, I can only speak for European magazines, I don't think any of us get paid. Well, you know, we just like the music and just want to spread the word about such fantastic world-class musicians, really.
And so we have an array of some of the magazines that you've been writing for, and we'll take a look at those and talk about some of the artists that you've met along the way. And you know, maybe you are in the medical business as a professional, but for sure this is a professional. You know, it's a magazine, and you've been writing, so it sort of seems to qualify as quite an achievement, really, by documenting these artists for the folks, you know, in the UK and beyond. France and other places. So we'll be right back with Mike. Okay. We'll talk more about this after these words.
Since 1849, Carter Jewelers has been a part of Jackson's rich history. Over 163 years later, we've not only survived, Carter Jewelers has flourished. From generation to generation, we've established a tradition of excellence. Our reputation is built on customer satisfaction, service, and trust. Every piece of jewelry is hand-picked, so you know you're getting the best value.
Nobody says I do like we do at Carter Jewelers.
Come see us and be part of our history.
Ingalls Shipbuilding is hiring electricians, structural welders, machinists, ship fitters, pipe fitters, and pipe welders in our Pascagoula, Mississippi site. Signing bonuses available for pipe welders only. Positions are union represented. Come build your career with Ingalls Shipbuilding. Go to www.huntingtoningalls.com/careers or call 888-935-1507.
Well, we're talking to Mike Stephenson, and he is a writer for Blues and Rhythm magazine. It's a UK-based magazine, and also he writes for Jefferson, which is based out of Sweden. And these are just a couple of the magazines in the European marketplace that document the blues artists from Mississippi. And so, okay, tell us about some of the blues artists that you've met through the years. Since the 1970s you've been coming.
the list is quite considerable, really.
What about Chicago guys?
Okay, Chicago, yeah. So Chicago really was where I first came into the US, as I mentioned earlier on, in '79, and then we came back. In '80, and then came back in '89, and then I think our first trip to Mississippi was maybe early '90s for the Sunflower Blues Festival in Clarksdale, and when I say we, that's myself and my wife. And then we've subsequently been back and forth to Chicago many times since, and also Mississippi as well. And more recently, as my disposable income has got better, I attempt to get back, sometimes with my wife, sometimes by myself, at least twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, and that's usually Chicago and Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much where I tend to go out and pitch it.
So, have you documented any differences between the artists in Chicago and the artists that are here in Mississippi?
Any differences?
Any differences in the style, or any differences in personality?
Well,
what would you say?
I couldn't say that. I wouldn't say that really. Majority of the guys are trying to make a buck, to be quite honest, on a daily basis, because the blues seems not to pay a lot of money to the artists, so it's a bit of a struggle for them. I think Mississippi has more of a rural acoustic type blues tradition than, shall we say, Chicago, and still has. But I wouldn't say there's a huge amount of difference these days in styles, really. Yeah, probably people would disagree with that. But I'm talking about more modern blues. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there is a more modern blues now, I guess, right? Wouldn't you say?
Wow, it's remarkable, really.
What is happening with all that? Where is it going? Well, how is it evolving?
Okay. Well. What is extremely heartening for somebody like me who's loved this music for many years is to see, okay, let me just go back here some. I and the magazines believe that it's an African-American music. Okay. They're the originators of the music, they're the owners of the music. So our emphasis and my emphasis is on helping and promoting African-American blues musicians. So I just need to make that statement, really. So going on from there, for me, who's been around for quite some time, it is extremely heartening to see young African Americans taking hold of their musical culture, heritage, which is the blues, and starting to do something with it rather than abandoning it, which I think has maybe happened in the past, really. So now there's really a considerable number of young African Americans really starting to shake the blues about a bit, add new rhythms, add new styles to the music. And it seems to me, from an outsider's point of view, that this is where down south is starting to have the edge over the northern cities of America. There seems to be more young African Americans getting into the music in Mississippi, etc., than there does seem to be in Chicago these days. And the list really is quite considerable. For me, personally, the top of the list is Jericka Singleton, who is, I think, destined for huge things in the future.
And Jericka's is from Mississippi?
Jericka's is from right here, your hometown in Jackson.
And we've got a picture of you with Jericka's. I believe we did. I don't know if we were able to show it, but that particular picture was taken here in the Jackson area?
Possibly, yeah, that's where I've met him. Mm-hmm. I've also, seen him in Chicago as well. So you have Jarekus, you've got people like Dexter Allen, Homemade Jams, who have Mr. Sip.
Eddie Cotton.
Eddie Cotton
Look,
Jr.
we've got a picture of Eddie Cotton, I think. Let's
Okay.
take a look. Eddie Cotton, there's Eddie Cotton. So,
Okay, yeah.
now,
Eddie
Jarekus,
Cotton, yeah.
he is a young artist. He's only 30.
Yep.
He recently got a record contract with Alligator Records,
Alligator Records,
which is a big blues record
Right,
company.
The major one, yeah.
And so, but his music is, he's stretching it out. He's evolving the old standard blues into something a little different, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really is at the cutting edge, I feel, of modern blues. You know, his influences are, like so many young African Americans, through the church, and then hip hop and rap and stuff like that. And he incorporates all those influences in an extremely original way in a blues format, which I don't hear anybody else doing what he's doing at the moment.
We hope to have him on the show soon.
Yeah.
To play, and so right here on the set. So that'll be exciting. But
Sure.
it's good to know that there is some evolvement of the art form
Wow.
at this point.
It's got to do that, otherwise it just stays a museum piece.
Right.
That's just no good at all, because it's always been an evolving music. The
And
blues.
it makes sense that
Always.
that would happen here
Always.
in Mississippi. You know?
Yeah, okay.
You know.
Yeah. But, you know, just going back to the other young blues artists, I really would like to give them a shout out. You know, I think it's extremely important for these guys. There's Jamal Richardson, another young guy. You've got Grady Champion here in Jackson. And added to these headline names are their support musicians, who are as equally as talented as Jarekus or Dexter Allen, and they're primarily young African Americans as well who are getting into the music. And quite often, my experience has been, you'll get these young, say a bass player, who then becomes a lead guitar player 2 years later down the line, and 2 years later down the line, he's leading his own band. So it's kind of like a progressive process. You can't just quite often just come wham bam straight into being a band leader, really. So the future, to my mind, looks extremely positive for the blues. No, I wouldn't have said that 15 years back, or even a decade back. And you know, you've got other bands like the Peterson Brothers out of Texas. You've got Marquise Knox. These are just some of the guys that, off the top of my head, I can think of.
Chris Thomas King.
Chris Thomas King, yeah, I haven't heard too much about him recently, but yeah, Chris Thomas King.
From Louisiana, right?
Yeah. And up in Chicago, you have younger guys. You've got Omar Coleman, who's a classy harmonica player. You've got some Dalmark record artists such as Mike Wheeler, Toronzo Cannon, who is another cutting-edge artist. I wouldn't, like Jarekus, making modern statements. So, you know, things are happening in Chicago from a modern point of view as well. You have to understand, I can only speak for these places that I've been. I'm sure if someone come from the West Coast, they would be, you know, giving shout-outs to artists over there, but I'm not that au fait with that particular area, I have to say.
So the magazine, Blues and Rhythm,
Yep.
This magazine, I'm sure it has a web presence, right?
Yes, it does, yes. It's www.bluesandrhythm.co.
Bluesandrhythm.com.
UK.
.com? No, .uk.
.uk, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So bluesandrhythm.uk.
Yeah, that'll get you there.
Yeah. Good.
And
well, we're going to hopefully have some of these great blues artists on the program soon. And we want to thank you for taking the time, Mike, to come on today and talk to us about this. It's been insightful to learn about how the other side of the world is looking at something that's indigenous to our area, you know. So
my pleasure.
it's been a pleasure having you. So thank you.
It helps, it helps.
It does help. We hope to have you back again, okay? They're telling me I need to get out, so thank you for being with us. And we'll be right back after this.
Since 1849, Carter Jewelers has been a part of Jackson's rich history. Over 163 years later, we've not only survived, Carter Jewelers has flourished. From generation to generation, we've established a tradition of excellence. Our reputation is built on customer satisfaction, service, and trust. Every piece of jewelry is hand-picked, so you know you're getting the best value.
Nobody says I do like we do at Carter Jewelers.
Come see us and be part of our history.
Ingalls Shipbuilding is hiring electricians, structural welders, machinists, ship fitters, pipe fitters, and pipe welders in our Pascagoula, Mississippi site. Signing bonuses available for pipe welders only. Positions are union represented. Come build your career with Ingalls Shipbuilding. Go to www.huntingtoningalls.com/careers or call 888-935-1507.
Well, that's bluesandrhythm.uk, and that's the magazine, one of the magazines that Mike Stephenson writes for. And if you go online and check it out, you'll learn a lot about how the Brits and the United Kingdom look at our homegrown music, the blues, right here in Mississippi. I'd like to thank Peggy Brown for bringing in Mike tonight, and also for being a liaison to the blues community, and hopefully we'll have some of these great artists on the show in the days and weeks ahead. That's kind of what we're thinking we would like to do, is document some of the great blues artists and provide a showcase for their music here, right here in the hometown where they live and where a lot of them grew up, and so that our own folks here in Jackson can see some of these great artists. So join us. We'll be back tomorrow night. We've got another exciting show for you here on NIghtique. I'm Edward St. Pé, and thanks for being with us.